Evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Um, Tonight we're going to have Ron Brecher, did I say that right? Talking about deconvolution. Adam didn't give me an image of the week this week, so we'll skip that at the moment. And we'll go straight over to Ron for his presentation.
Yeah, I've been called worse. It's actually pronounced Brecher, but like I say, I've been called worse. I'm just setting up my screen share here, and are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, you are?
No, I said deconvolution. Keep going.
Yeah, good. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just go through a relatively short presentation, 15 or 20 minutes. And then towards the end, I'm going to actually give you a demonstration in PixInsight, and then we can do some Q&A. So I'm going to basically just give you a little bit of what deconvolution is and isn't, how it differs from sharpening, where it fits in the workflow. We have to take a couple of little side trips to deal with deconvolution support images. So I'm going to talk about masks and how to generate a point spread function. And I'll leave you with some resources and, as I say, a demonstration towards the end. So the word deconvolution, when you put D in front of a word, obviously you're undoing something. And what we're undoing is convolution, which is the mixing of two signals. So the pure signal from the stars that we want gets degraded by the signal from the imperfect seeing and the optics. And that leads to some blurring and loss of detail. So deconvolution is a technique that's used to back out that degradation and restore the detail that was lost to the atmospheric blurring. So what you see is a subtle improvement in detail in the bright areas of an image. The stars will generally get a little bit tighter. And although that effect might seem subtle at the time you apply it, which is quite early in the workflow, as you'll see, it pays dividends later on for noise reduction and sharpening. It's been around a long time. It was developed back in, well, it was first published in 1949 in a book by Norbert Wiener. I'm not sure if that's Wiener or Weiner from MIT. He developed most of the foundation of deconvolution. It's many, many different sciences as well as astronomy. And in fact, it was used to improve the Hubble images before the Hubble got its glasses. Because deconvolution appears to sharpen things, I mean, it does improve the visibility of fine detail. It can get confused with sharpening, but they're quite different. Deconvolution is a signal separation technique. I think of it as taking the milk out of the coffee, if you know what I mean. You've got two things that are apparently inextricably linked together, and you use information about the way they're linked to back that effect out. So separating the signal we want from the signal that we don't want. And you have to do that early in the workflow, and I'll explain why in a moment. Sharpening, on the other hand, is really a local contrast enhancement technique, and it basically gives you a boost in contrast at the edges of structures, and that gives you the appearance of more detail. You tend to apply sharpening quite late in the workflow, in contrast to deconvolution, which is done early. So for deconvolution to work, an image has to be linear. In other words, there has to be a linear relationship between the brightness of a pixel, its intensity, and how many photons actually reach that pixel or the stack of pixels. So you can't have done any stretching to the image before you do deconvolution. The other thing about it is that you don't need to do it on chrominance data. Use it only on your luminance. In my case, I don't shoot luminance. I make a synthetic luminance. If you're shooting one-shot color, you can extract the lightness channel. That's the CIE LAB lightness channel from your color image and apply deconvolution to that. Or as you'll see when I do the demonstration, the deconvolution tool actually lets you select the lightness channel to be targeted. I do deconvolution very early in the workflow, right after background modelization, which is basically a fancy way of saying gradient removal. A couple of important ideas here. First of all, the point spread function, which is, you might have heard about it as the PSF. It's basically a mathematical description of how a point of light gets spread out by the atmosphere or by blurring in the optics. There's a couple of ways you can measure it, and I'm going to show you one in PixInsight. But you can also just make assumptions about what it might be like. For example, you can assume that stars have a Gaussian spread. So stars are so far away that if we had perfect optics, they would be single points of light. And of course, we know that the wave properties of light prevent that from happening. We get, I think it's 86% in the central area disk and 14% in the diffraction rings or the spikes in a reflector. So in any case, you can make assumptions about the shape, or you can measure it, and I'm gonna measure it when I do the demonstration. We need to know a little bit about masks, because when you do deconvolution, you want to target it to the areas where the detail is. You want to leave the bright stars alone. You want to leave the background alone. So we need to use masks. And when you apply a mask to an image, only the parts that are visible through the mask get changed. Masks are usually black and white images, and you can say white reveals and black conceals. So where you can see something through the mask, the process that you're about to do will cause an effect. Now, you'll see when I apply a mask in PixInsight, the areas that were black in the mask turn red to make it easier to see. So you might say white reveals and red conceals in that case. You can use any image as a mask. You can process masks, so you can copy an image and process it to improve its efficiency for using as a mask. So you can stretch it, sharpen it, blur it, invert it, blend it with other masks using pixel math. There are also a couple of dedicated tools in PixInsight for making masks. The star mask tool, which allows you to select stars. We're going to use that one. The range selection tool allows you to select a range of brightness. We're not going to use that one for this demonstration, but I just wanted to include it for completeness. So if this is my source image, oops, sorry about that, gang. If this is my source image at upper right here, you can see I can just copy it and stretch it to make a luminance mask. I can make a range mask with the range selection tool, that's at bottom center, or I can use the star mask tool to just make a mask that contains the stars. Then I can do further processing. So for example, I could subtract the star mask from the range mask to have this blurred range mask absent the stars. Okay. There was a reason why I took you on that little detour towards the point spread function and masks. And that is that before we can do deconvolution in PixInsight, we need to prepare 3 support images. The first one is a mask that's going to target the effect of the deconvolution just where we want it, which is going to be on the bright areas of an image. And we're going to just use a stretched copy of the image for that. The second thing we want is what's called the local de-ringing support image. So the global de-ringing, so deconvolution can produce dark rings around bright objects like stars. And the global de-ringing that's built into PixInsight does a good job on small stars, but on the largest stars, you need extra protection. And this local de-ringing support image is going to tell the deconvolution process where to give extra protection to bright stars. And finally, we need a point spread function, and we're going to make that using the dynamic PSF tool. So basically, we're going to prepare our 3 support images and apply the mask to our target image. Then we're going to set up the process. We're going to go through a number of steps to optimize the settings. When I get the settings where I like them on the preview, then we're going to apply it to an image and inspect. I wanted to, before we do the demo, just mention to you that there's a number of resources you can go to. Somebody already mentioned the book Inside PixInsight. Warren Keller wrote that book. It's available through ip4ap.com, springer.com, or at Amazon. You can get subscription tutorial at ip4ap.com. There's free tutorials at Harry's Astro Shed. PixInsight forum has a lot of good information, or you can go to my website. I've got an article on deconvolution from the July 2017 Sky and Telescope there, and I give processing details with every image, also available for tutoring. Okay, with that, I'm going to just get out of this and open up PixInsight.
Hey, Ron, before you get into the process,
Yeah.
There's a question for here.
Sure.
Bill asks, when you read the literature,
How do I see those questions?
We have them on the website, and we'll just.
Oh, you're going to read it to me. Okay.
So he's asking, when you read the literature for the deconvolution process in PI, it specifically does not want you to use masks, other than star masks. What is the advantage to using this?
To using, I couldn't hear you very clearly. Your voice was distorted. What is the advantage of using a star mask?
What is the advantage of using masks?
The advantage of using a mask, as you're going to see, is that it protects the areas of the image where there is no detail to deconvolve.
Okay, and Alex wants to know more about your tutoring. How does that work?
More about my...
Your tutoring.
My tutoring. Contact me, just contact me offline, rbrecher@rogers.com.
Okay, that was it so far.
Yeah, I mean, I tutor, it's $60 an hour. I do it online. And you can contact me at my email, and happy to set it up anywhere from beginner to advanced, any type of camera system that you want to use. Okay, shall I go into the demo now?
Yeah, go ahead and proceed.
Okay, so what this is a synthetic luminance file opened in PixInsight. Nothing has been done to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an auto stretch on it. This is going to make it visible on screen, but it doesn't actually change the data. You can see it blinking on and off. It's just an auto stretch. And this is at 1/3 of full resolution. If I zoom into 100%, it's quite a nice image. But what I want to do is see if we can enhance some of the detail in these brighter areas here. You see all this curdling? So again, if we look at the whole image, we want to see if we can sharpen everything in this ridge. I think you're also going to see deconvolution is going to sharpen up the stars a little bit and make fainter stars visible. Stars that weren't visible before are going to start to pop. Now, I mentioned that in order to do deconvolution, the first thing we have to do is make some support images. And the first one that I'm going to make is the mask. So I'm going to take the tab and drag it anywhere onto the desktop to make a clone of my image. And let's rename this clone Decon mask. That helps me remember what it's for. Now I have to stretch it. You can't use, so if I tried to use the mask like this, it wouldn't let anything through, really, just a few points. So almost no deconvolution would happen. I have to stretch this. So I'm going to use,
Stay the same.
pardon me?
They all have to stay the same in whatever linear state you have them in. Each one has to be the same one.
That's right. And I'm not changing my target image, which is my synthetic luminance.
Right.
Let me minimize that. All I'm affecting right now is the deconvolution mask. And I can see what happens when I sharpen it up or brighten it up a little bit and make this mask really work nicely for me. I'm just adjusting the histogram here.
Now, this is where I always get confused trying to do this.
Well, again, you can, I don't know if you can see this, but you can adjust the scale here so that you can get better resolution. Now, I don't want any deconvolution in here.
Good.
And I really don't want any in here. So I don't mind doing some clipping here to really limit the effect. Remember, this is a mask.
So you didn't have, you pulled your synthetic when you made your mask. It doesn't matter one way or the other what you do to it, but you do have to screen stretch it so you can see what you're doing with your mask.
Yeah, but now I've really stretched it for real.
Gotcha.
Okay, because before I couldn't use it as a mask. By the way, in PixInsight, you can tell whether something is stretched by the appearance of a green line.
Right.
Here, it means that there's a stretch on.
Right.
But now it's not stretched because I've applied a permanent stretch.
Gotcha.
Okay, so this mask is ready to use. I'm just going to put it aside for a minute and go back to my target image. Now, the next thing I needed, I think I mentioned, was a local de-ringing support image. So this bright star over here on the left side, and this one on the right side, and the one at lower right of center, near the bottom right of center.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure we get good protection for those stars. So we're just going to use the star mask tool, which is in the mask generation menu. And I'm going to use it with almost default settings. So if this little symbol at the bottom right of most processes is a reset button. So the only thing I'm going to do is just reduce the truncation so that all my saturated stars end up in the mask, and I'm going to hit go or drag. I can drag this triangle onto the image. Now I'm generating a star mask, and it's only going to have the bright stars in it.
That's going to prevent like halo and other colors variations.
No, it's not going to prevent halos. What it's going to do is tell deconvolution where to give extra protection to stars.
Gotcha.
So we've made a star mask, and we could use it in the way that you just described. But in this example, I'm changing its name to LDSI, which is going to stand for Local De-Ringing Support Image.
Because you got those three really bright stars.
Yeah, here they are. There's one here.
Right.
I got the other one there, and there's the third one. So those were the ones I was most concerned about. So let's put it aside. Oopsie. Let's just put it aside. That's our second support image. So remember, we made our deconvolution mask. Now we've made our local de-ringing support image, which looks like a mask, but we're not going to use it as a mask. We're going to use it as a way to tell deconvolution where to protect the stars.
Leave those three alone.
Yeah, leave those, and more than just those three. You can see there's,
One,
you know, quite a bunch, but not the small ones.
right.
They'll be okay.
That's
Okay, so the third thing we need is to define the point spread function. How has the atmosphere blurred the stars, the atmosphere and the optics? To do that, we're going to go to the image menu and find the command dynamic PSF. And what we want to do is just click on stars and focus on this column here, the A column. A stands for amplitude. We want an amplitude less than 1. 1 is saturated, so let's maybe limit it to say 0.8. We don't want saturated stars. But we also don't want really faint stars, so let's say between 0.2 and 0.8 for amplitude. So you can see this one is 0.58. If I go to one of these small ones, you can see its amplitude is too low, 0.05. And if I go to one of the bright ones, oh, it says it's okay. What do you know? So let's use the bright ones. I'm just clicking on brighter stars. Don't forget, this image is not stretched for real.
right.
It's just visualized as a stretch.
So it's just trying to get a range, I guess, right?
Yeah. And I aim for, 10 to 20 stars, 20 to 30 stars maybe.
And is that like your norm for each of your processes, or each one's different? I mean, do you have like a starting ground for each one?
Well, for any time I do deconvolution, I aim for 20 to 30 stars.
Gotcha.
But if you're, so this is about 1 arc second per pixel image scale. If you're shooting very high magnification, so very high resolution, you may not have as many stars. So you don't need this many. You can see now I've got 21 stars.
Right.
I've got a couple. I think they're all between 0.2 and 0.8. Yeah, they are. So I can. There's a couple of other settings here, like the beta, the theta, and the R, which some people like to look at. They are described inside PixInsight. Their use is described in the book. But I have found generally that all you need is to get the amplitude in the right range. And really you want all Moffat or all Gaussian. So these are mostly Moffat with a few Gaussian. I'm going to delete the Gaussian. So I'm just using the little minus icon to delete the selected stars. So now I have 19 good stars and I'm selecting them all. If I now click on this little camera icon, you'll see a tooltip. I haven't clicked on it yet. You'll see a tooltip pops up. I'm going to export a synthetic point spread function as a new image. So here I go. And you see it here. Let me just magnify that like crazy. That's the average star in my image. Or let's say the average of these 19 stars. I'm done with dynamic PSF, so I can close out of it now. And I now have my 3 support files. So let's apply this mask onto my image. And in PixInsight, you do that by taking hold of this tab identifier on the left bar and drag it over to the target image and let go. Now I can shrink this down again. I don't need it. You can see right now where the mask is red, red conceals, white reveals. I have some mask tools here that I can make the mask visible or not. But what you can see is that whatever I do next is going to be applied to the stars and to these bright areas of the nebula. Everybody good with that? Okay. So let's open up deconvolution. There's 3 tabs at the top here. The parametric PSF is the fast food method for deconvolution. If we did not have a point spread function that we created, we could use this to estimate the point spread function, even whether it's elliptical or not. Deconvolution can also be used if you have out of round stars. So you can fix the elongated stars a little bit. But really what we want to do is use the PSF that we created to deconvolve this image. We mask the image so we're sure that we're protecting the areas that we don't want to deconvolve. So first thing in this tab is to set what image we're going to use. That is set. The tab is set. We don't need to see that anymore. Algorithm. There's 4, but really there's 2 algorithms, Van Sittert and Richardson-Lucy. And there's a regular version and then a regularized version, which includes suppression of noise. It doesn't reduce noise, but it prevents noise from increasing during deconvolution. If you're doing deconvolution on a very high signal image like the moon, try the Van Sittert or the regularized Van Sittert. But for deep sky images, regularized Van Sittert is what you want to use. If you're using a point spread function like we are, an external point spread function, you can use 50 to 80 iterations. And we can now hide that. Okay, so let's look at the deringing settings. So the global dark deringing settings are going to suppress dark rings around bright stars. So let's just take a little highlight, a little preview here. And I'm turning deringing off completely. Okay, I've turned it off. And let's just see what happens. You see those dark rings? Those are, that's called the Gibbs effect. And that is caused by deconvolution. So you need to have some deringing. 2 kinds of deringing. There's global deringing and local deringing. Let's talk about the global deringing first of all. Global dark deringing is what we need to prevent the kind of problem that you see here. Sometimes, as I'm going to show you, you get in bright areas, you can get these worm-like features, and global bright can help you remove those. So what you want to do is use as little global deringing as you need to solve the problem. So you can see just adding a little bit of this global dark deringing solve the problem. Almost. I still see some dark ringing. You see it here? Slightly dark rings. I think those are going to be dealt with in the local deringing, which is, remember we made that local deringing support image to help us target protection to some of those stars. So let's try it again. So the star halos are fixed. Do you see the slight worminess of this feature up here?
Yeah.
You cannot see that? So
No,
here's
Yes.
where it's, this
You
is
can
where
see
it
it.
started. This is where we started. So no deconvolution right now. And now I'm going to flip the switch. There's with deconvolution.
Wow, can you go back again?
Yes? Okay, this is without.
Uh-huh.
And now with.
Ah, that makes a difference.
Oh, yes. But if you look carefully, and let's see if I can zoom in a little more here.
The hardest part is getting all those masks built and set up, and you know that's
Yeah.
You know.
But I've shown you how now, and you can go through this as many times as it takes.
Right.
Do you see this slight worminess of the bright features here?
Yeah.
So we can deal with that by just increasing the global bright deringing slightly.
Hmm.
That's better.
Yeah.
So that's with, without.
Yeah, that's zoomed in too. So
I still think we need a little bit more dark deringing. I still see a little bit of darkness. I want to use the lowest settings here that solve my problem.
so part of that third mask that you made is dependent upon how many stars that you have available to you in that shot too, as well as that.
You only need a few.
Okay.
I like to use 20 to 30, but I have that luxury because I have a wide field.
Gotcha.
But you can do it with a few.
Gotcha.
Use what you got.
All right.
Okay, so that's with, without. So what you should see is an improvement in the sharpness in these features in the nebula, a shrinking of the bigger stars, and better definition in the faint stars. Can everybody see it?
Yep. You can see the diffraction spikes moving around when you're moving it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tightens up.
Yeah. So once we've tested it now on this preview up here, I also want to make sure that we're not damaging anything anywhere else. So let's test it out on another preview. Yeah, we're all good. Nothing's happening there. Maybe, yeah, nothing's happening there. That's good. And we want to make sure we're getting some good improvement down in here. So let's see how we like our, how do we like our settings here? Just 1 second. Oops, sorry. Just give me a second. I want to just be able to visualize this a little bit better. Okay, here we go. Just a sec. There we go. So this is at 100%. This is with deconvolution and without.
Ron, why don't you zoom in a little bit in that preview so we can see it better?
So this is without right now. And now I'm going to flip the switch with. What you should have seen is this star in particular got smaller, the faint stars got brighter, and an improvement in detail along these edge features. So this is with deconvolution visible right now, and I'm going to turn it off now. And I'm going to turn it back on now. Where you'll see it especially is up in here. Can you see it going on and off? Hello?
Yeah, we can see the change.
Okay, good.
It's pretty slight, so it may be a little fuzzy on the video.
Well, it's meant to be slight.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a sharpening technique.
But when you're zoomed in so close like that, it's going to be very small. But when you back away from it, it's going to really make it sharper.
Oh yeah, so if we look at this now at actual magnification. So that's with and without. So it's without right now. Flip the switch, with. So why don't we apply it now to the whole image? The only thing I'm going to do, oh, I didn't talk about wavelet regularization. This is the noise suppression tool. So it doesn't prevent noise. It reduces the appearance of noise due to the sharpening. And the default is just 3 layers. I like to use 5 layers for this noise suppression portion. And I've never found a benefit to the dynamic range extension. There's other tools that do a better job than that. So while I apply that, and this is now going to take a minute or two, does anybody have any questions?
So Bill asked how many iterations? And
How many iterations?
Yeah, maybe you could further expand how you choose how many iterations you need.
Well, what I did is what I always encourage people to do, which is experiment. It might be different with different systems, but I've found that if you're using the external PSF the way I've just done, that you can do a lot more iterations, in the 50 to 100 range. And I think on the slide I mentioned 50 to 80. On this image, 80 was right. If you're using the Gaussian PSF, which was the first tab, probably no more than 10 iterations. Bottom line is, work on a preview and try different numbers of iterations. It only takes a few seconds until you get a number that you're happy with. And you may find if you use more iterations, you need a little bit more de-ringing. But again, you always want the lowest de-ringing settings that accomplish the prevention of the artifact.
Right, for the bright, right. Yeah, for me, the whole deconvolution thing is, I mean, I wanted to do it so bad, but it seemed like the prep work to get to the point where you actually get to do it was difficult, trying to learn the masks and how to put them together and choose the correct iteration, choose the correct amount of stars. And so that's been the struggle for me anyway.
Okay, well, I think, okay, so this is done now. This is deconvolved. And now I'm going to undo it. Subtle, right?
Right.
But when you get later on in the workflow and it's time to do some sharpening, you're going from a much better starting point.
Yeah.
Similarly, the signal to noise in these areas is really improved. So when you do noise reduction, you can be much more targeted in how you do that. And now I'm going to undo it and delete all these previews. And I just want to delete all of the masks that I made.
What I like about it is that you can use this to target areas. Normally, because I was so kind of nervous about trying to make all those masks, I stayed away from it, and I would use deconvolution over the entire image at the end. Whereas this gives you the opportunity to target your best areas of your shot, make it happen, and then bring it all together later on, and not have to mess with areas that you really didn't need to mess with from the beginning.
That's right. I want to go through the 3 support images again, because this is where everybody gets hung up. So first, make your mask. Copy the image and stretch it. Should only take a second to home in on the right settings. They're there. That's one support image. You can remember to rename that, right? So that you know what you're using it for. I always try to remember to rename my images. The next one we need is the local de-ringing support to protect the bright stars. Okay, I'm resetting the tool. All we need to set is the truncation down a little bit. And you know what? It's really no big deal if you don't. I'm going to leave it at default. Because I want to emphasize how simple it is to make these support images. What people get hung up on is the need for them, and they really are quite simple to make. That's it. Done. Rename it, because we want to remember what it's for. It's our local de-ringing support. Going to tell deconvolution where to give extra protection to bright stars. The third one we need is the point spread function. That's dynamic PSF. Click on stars, aim for an amplitude between 0.2 and 0.8. If the stars are too bright, pick fainter stars. If the stars are too faint, pick brighter stars. 5 or 6 is enough. If you can get 20, so much the better. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to look at my amplitudes. They're all in the right range. I want them all to be either Gaussian or all to be either Moffat. I deleted the one Gaussian. Select them all and click the camera to export my PSF. That's my third support image. Okay, so this is where people get hung up. Make those support images, give them the right names, then apply the mask. And if the reason why you can remember which one to use is because you named it. Apply the mask, make sure it's visible, that it targets what you want. Now you're ready to run deconvolution. We're going to run it on a small area first because it takes a long time. So we want to home in on the right settings. When we're happy with the settings, did everybody see that pop?
Yes.
When we're happy with the settings,
Yes.
good. And here it's off again. When you're happy with those settings, go back to your full image and apply it. Okay, so basically we are able to demonstrate that twice in about 20 minutes. So you should be able to get it set up and running nicely on a little preview in 10 to 15 minutes, including the time it takes to make these support images. So remember, deconvolution mask is just a copy of the image that's been stretched. The local de-ringing support image is just a star mask for bright stars. And the point spread function, you use dynamic PSF and select a bunch of stars and then export a synthetic. star. Questions?
So Ron, there was a question about the divergence that pops up in the console sometimes. Can you explain
Yeah, so usually divergence means that you've got maybe too many iterations or more iterations than you need. But it generally doesn't do any harm. If you're getting those on every iteration, back off a little bit. But again, experiment on a preview. You may also see that local divergence when you're looking at a preview, but not see it on an image, on the whole image. So try a few different previews. It's things in pink in PixInsight are warnings. They're not fatal.
And there was another question about how you got the original luminance synthetic.
How did I? How did I what?
I think he's asking how did you get the original synthetic luminance?
Oh, how did I get the original synthetic luminance? What I did is I used image integration to blend the RGB and H alpha channels. Okay, so that's completed. You can see it's quite nice. Nice detail brought out here, but no noise introduced in the dark areas.
So when you're looking for a place for your first preview window, you want an area that's, you know, got a lot of good nebulosity, a lot of stars, a lot of detailed things going on in there. Is that what you're primarily looking for? Blacks, whites?
Yeah, I'm looking for areas. Well, I would want to have. So if I could, let me just. Yeah, if I could have, say, 3 previews anywhere, this would be one of them. I would put another one probably here, and maybe another one here. Right, that's going to tell me.
Getting all the total references from all of your blacks, your grays, your whites. All
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. And now that I've done deconvolution, or I'm going to go ahead and reapply. So now that deconvolution is done, the next thing I would do is I would do some noise reduction. Because I don't want to sharp. So there's some, if I just boost the stretch a little bit, you see all this sort of salt and pepper noise. My next thing would be to make that go away. And I would use a multi-scale linear transform for that. But that's another topic. Do you want to see this real quick, the multi-scale linear transform?
Yeah, it's not going to hurt. We don't have any other questions that I
Okay.
see.
Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is remove the mask off this image. So I've just removed the mask. By the way, you can tell when there's a mask in place because this tab turns brown when there's a mask in place. So noise in an image lives in the smallest scales. So I have to apply the most noise reduction at the smallest scales. I don't know what the right settings are here, guys. I'm just doing what I always do, which is to experiment. And let's put this down. So you can see I'm setting up the different layers. Layers refers to the scale of objects in an image. So if you looked at when you look at an image, there's very small features like tiny stars. There's medium features like small galaxies, perhaps. and dark nebulas, and then there's large features like some of the things we deconvolved, right? So these are all represented by different layers. Okay, so I've kind of set up this part of it. Let's close that up. Close that up. Now what I want to do is I want to use a linear mask. So what this is going to do, if I preview the mask, it's going to protect the bright areas and apply noise reduction to the dark areas. And I can adjust that mask with this tool, with the amplification setting. So I want to apply more noise reduction in the darkest areas of the image, which are the white areas of the mask, right? White reveals, black conceals. So anywhere that's black in this internal mask is not going to get much noise reduction. Anything that's white is going to get lots of noise reduction. So that's a pretty good mask setting. So I can turn off the mask preview.
I guess it's important to mention that the inverted mask is checked over there.
Yeah, and that's checked by default. That's checked by default. Again, you can, if you're not sure what any of these settings do, you can put the mouse over the box and you'll get a tooltip that will come up. But this inverted mask is set by default. So again, let's make this image visible so that we can set up a nice preview. There we go. Okay, so when I'm doing noise reduction, I want to make sure I get really good noise reduction in the dark areas and I don't lose resolution in the light areas. So let's make an image or a preview that has a little of both. And I'm going to boost the stretch so that we can see it a little bit better. Okay. So we can see the dark bits. We can see the bright bits. We've got our linear mask applied. We don't need anything else. If this was a color image, we could tell it whether to apply it to the color components or the luminance or the RGB. But this is a black and white image, so I'm applying it now. And you can see, maybe you can't see, I'm going to boost the, see how that's smoothed that out? So here's before. That's before. There's after.
That's pretty subtle.
Well, to me, it's very obvious. I'm sure part of it's to do with the video. Let me see if I can boost it even higher. So this is after noise reduction. Here's before.
I see a
After?
huge difference. I don't know about you guys, but
Yeah, there's definitely a big difference there.
Yeah, it's very.
Okay, so we see a big difference in the dark areas, but now let's look at the areas we wanted to protect down here. So this is before noise reduction. After. We're still getting an improvement in these darker bits here, but we've maintained the brightness and sharpness that we got from deconvolution.
Yeah, when you back away from that, it's going to be really, really pretty.
Oh yeah. So now that I've verified these settings, I can apply it. And this image is now ready to stretch. And I'll show you a cool little thing. I'm just going to reset the histogram tool. Completely reset. So my histogram is tucked up tight against the left side. If I open the screen transfer function and just auto stretch it, that's a pretty nice looking stretch. I can actually transfer these settings by dragging the triangle down to histogram and apply it right there. So now it's permanently stretched. Now that actually clipped some black pixels, so I wouldn't do that stretch. I would do it manually by moving my gray point, then zooming in a little bit so that I can adjust my black point. This tells me I haven't clipped any pixels. I might do a real-time preview so I could see it. Still haven't clipped any pixels.
No, and your whites are white, your blacks, your grays. It's all nice and smooth and sharp. It looks good.
Yeah. So the deconvolution first, followed by linear noise reduction. And now that this thing is stretched, I could take that deconvolution mask, or let me just show you a different mask making tool. What I can do is I can make a range mask. So mask generation, range selection. And I'm just selecting the brighter bits of the nebula. Yes. So this is a mask now that I can use for sharpening. So if I put that mask in place, see how the tab turned brown? That tells me there's a mask in place.
Right.
And now I can apply sharpening very selectively. Now that's a little too selective. Let's do that mask again. Sorry, my dog's going crazy. Let's do that mask one more time. So I'm applying the mask. And now let's just take a preview here. Make the mask invisible. And now let's use multi-scale. Remember we just used this for noise reduction?
Yep.
I'm going to now use it for sharpening. So I've reset the tool. And what I'm going to do is increase the bias in the second and third layer. So let's turn that up.
And those layers are depicted by the grayscale of what it's looking at, or?
These are size layers. These are size layers.
Okay.
So so one is 1 pixel structures, 2 is 2 pixel by 2 pixel structures, 3 is 3 pixel by 3 pixel, and so on. So if I apply this, you see what it's done. It's sharpened, but it's given me these horrible rings.
Right, I got you.
So I'm going to turn on the de-ringing and try again. That's too much de-ringing. There we go.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. And then we can apply that to the entire image. There we go. Well, guys, I think that's all I got.
I haven't seen any other questions come up, so not that were answered. I think there was some confusion about whether you worked on each RGB, or, I think we cleared that up. We just covered that.
Yeah, that was in this slide deck. If you have an RGB image, there's a couple of things you can do. Number one is you can extract the CIE luminance from it, process it separately, and then put it back in to the RGB. The other thing you can do is when you're running deconvolution, you can select the luminance as the target instead of the color channels. There's no benefit to doing deconvolution on chrominance data.
All right. If there's no other questions, that was excellent, Ron. Thanks for doing this for us.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, that was really cool. Thanks a lot. I'm an old black and white printer from film days, so to be able to see it done that way, that I've stayed completely away from it in PixInsight because of all the math and stuff. It's just too much, but I'm gonna give it a try now.
All right,
Good.
guys. We're gonna go off there.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Ron.
Take care.